Republican strategist Hogan Gidley, a former communications director for Mike Huckabee as well. Hogan, we had wondered about a campaign that had seemed more quixotic by the day of John Kasich. What do you make then of the news that he will be announcing a suspension of his campaign, according to sources in Columbus, Ohio, roughly 5 hours from now?
Josh, first let me say I am outside, so you may hear some birds chirping in the background. I'm out in the field today doing a little work, but I want, it's very interesting because Kasich was the establishment guy. He was lining himself up that way, and he got a lot of credit for being the candidate who was not going to engage in partisan nasty attacks and all of the mudslinging that was going on. The problem was that wasn't necessarily accurate. I mean, he has kind of a reputation on Capitol Hill for being a little bit prickly. And you saw that one campaign or one of the debates. He came out early on, swinging hard at Donald Trump. All the punches, none of them landed, and he kind of went silent for the next hour or so in the debate. It just didn't work. So he kind of tried to fill the only space he had left to fill, which was the pragmatic Republican governor who had some establishment ties, who is more moderate on several issues. The problem is that's very similar to someone like Mitt Romney in 2012, even someone like McCain in 2008, in the sense that they would not have been able to gin up the excitement of the base. I mean, even Barack Obama, when he won over Hillary Clinton, it's because he was able to bring out the base. When he won the general election, it was because he brought out the base. And our argument as Republicans for quite some time has been, if you can't get the base excited, you can't win the election. You've got to get the base. You can't win an election without the base, but you can't win an election with just the base. And Kasich would not have had the base in his pocket. He would have had some moderate. That's why some of the polling showed he could have beaten Hillary Clinton. But as your first, the guest on just before me mentioned, nobody wants to hear that. No voter really cares about that argument. What they want what they want. They say, look, this is my guy. I know he can win because he's my guy. They're not looking at polling to see what happens in November. They're taking what they see on the campaign trail and say, this is what excites me. This guy can excite the country. And right now, that's Donald Trump to the tune of 10 million plus votes, breaking records of John McCain's vote totals, Mitt Romney's vote totals, and now inching closer to beating George W. Bush's vote totals, which is the record amount of votes ever gotten in the GOP presidential primary process. So it's a very exciting day, a very exciting night, and now Kasich looks like he looks and says, I just can't do it. And remember, one other thing about the number 40B, the rule of the convention that says you have to win at least 8 states to even have your name put in for nomination. The reason he thought he could maybe do something at the convention was because if Ted Cruz stayed in, they could put enough people on that 121-person rules committee to make that change in that rule to say anyone who's won a state or however they want to write the rule. The problem is now that Trump looks like he's well on his way, he'll be the one stacking the committee. He'll be the one making the rules, much like every nominee does. Romney made that 40B rule to keep Ron Paul from causing any shenanigans. Now Donald Trump is going to be able to stack that committee, make the rule that makes sure nobody else gets involved. And if he just leaves the rule as is, you have to win 8 states, then that eliminates John Kasich from even being submitted as a nominee in the process.
It looks like Donald Trump's populist momentum, again, has thwarted such maneuvering on the part of John Kasich and Ted Cruz. And you mentioned, this was the great hope of John Kasich had been a contested convention when there were 3. As those hopes suddenly began to dwindle, he and Ted Cruz form an alliance that was perhaps lukewarm at best and perhaps misunderstood by the two forming said alliance, as John Kasich, to a degree, had continued to campaign in the state of Indiana, despite, in theory, ceding that to Ted Cruz for a one-on-one matchup against Donald Trump. And then what happened yesterday happened. We saw Donald Trump last night say that he was surprised by the decision by Ted Cruz to leave the race. We have heard from Reince Priebus both last night and again this morning here on CBS this morning that he said he, too, was surprised by the decision of the Texas senator. What impact did the suddenness, then, of Ted Cruz's departure have, do you suppose, on the Kasich campaign?
Well, it appears that the alliance they formed to try and defeat Donald Trump, which was ill-timed and ill-conceived, actually continued on to the process of deciding whether or not they stay in the race or not. and it showed Cruz decided to get out, which I was a little bit surprised by that too, only because both candidates were adamant about staying in, saying repeatedly, Donald Trump can't get there. No one can get there. This is going to a floor fight. You know, someone like Mike Huckabee, who I've worked for now for 20 years, he made the comment, if I don't do well in Iowa, obviously we've got to reassess. I mean, very open and very honest about how we did. That night we didn't do well. That night he got out. The delusion that was going on with the Kasich and Cruz campaigns about no one can get there, which wasn't true. Donald Trump could have gotten there. But their statements, people took them at face value, which was we're going to stay on, we're going to fight, this is going to the floor. Even though the numbers showed that was impossible for either one of them to win before they get to the convention, they made the comment, we know that now. Now we're just going to angle for a floor fight. Everyone believed that, but it turned out to be not true. And the impact, I believe, is that you're going to begin to see some of the establishment types who have been coming to grips with the fact that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. I think more of them are going to come out and try and rally behind him. And keep this in mind. I was on a radio show this morning, and folks who are adamantly opposed to Donald Trump, hate him, were big Ted Cruz people. They were with Ted Cruz, and they mentioned the same thing every time, because Hillary Clinton is the worst for the country, because the Supreme Court could be lost for a generation, conservative values gone, America in trouble. Well, those problems still exist, even if Ted Cruz isn't the nominee. Donald Trump is the nominee. So the question is, will those people who are so adamantly opposed to Hillary Clinton, are they going to take their own words to heart and say, now we've got to rally around to beat Hillary Clinton? Or is their hatred or anger with Trump going to keep them from participating in the process? If Trump plays this right, you know, Ronald Reagan only had 30% approval after he won the nomination the first time in 80 because everyone thought he was an actor and a goob and didn't understand politics. Now we have a similar situation, and I'm not comparing Donald Trump to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a governor and accomplished at that. But I am comparing the fact that not many folks, or there are a large swath of folks who are negatively think of Donald Trump, that he can't rally these folks. But one more point, and that is people are so focused on the negative here. So many people didn't like Donald Trump. Well, let's talk about who did. 10-plus million people voted for the guy. 3.5 million more, 4 million more than Ted Cruz, millions more than the rest of the field combined. I mean, this is an enormous seat. And at the time that Mitt Romney gave his famous speech saying we need to support anybody but Trump, even if you compare Mitt Romney to Donald Trump at the time and the states that they had voted in, Trump had 1.5 million more votes than Mitt Romney did. So this is definitely a movement. It's definitely a force. The question is, can he bring all those folks into the fold and take out Hillary Clinton? That's going to be the real issue moving forward.